Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. I'm having a bit of difficulty with Sophia Coppola and her filmography. Not because I don't think she's a great filmmaker with an incredible eye to cinematography and storytelling, and really sort of balances human drama whilst creating a sense of cinema. But I don't know, I found myself striking out more with her style than not. I previously mentioned the fact that I really didn't enjoy the name's gone out of my head, with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson. Lost in Translation. And that, not because it didn't have a wry sense of humour, and Bill Murray wasn't charismatic, and I didn't believe in their romance, but there was a coldness to it that I personally don't attach to. I find it very unempathetic and frustrating, and so therefore I end up observing a character, in that case Bill Murray's, and wanting to empathise with him, and clearly feeling like the story is wanting me to empathise, but ultimately not, and so therefore disliking a character like that. And The Beguiled is a strange film to adapt, because it's an adaptation of a 1971 Clint Eastwood film, and it reminds me... Okay, so the original Beguiled is very clearly supposed to be a possibly more mainstream psychosexual sexploitation thriller, where, of course, being in the 70s, there is a certain sense of boundary pushing and a darkness in the storytelling that it allowed actors and filmmakers to explore darker ideas and themes, and actors and characters who we would traditionally see as classical romantic, sort of like a Clint Eastwood who, sort of your traditional Western hero type. Not always, but broadly speaking, you were able to see him in a much more dramatically complex film where this isn't a good person, and the environment he's in is tense and difficult, and it allowed a bit more flexibility and breadth in the performance and the storytelling. However, the problem with films like that, especially with the 70s, is as I say, it was boundary pushing. And it reminds me a lot of, similarly, in British television drama, more in the 80s into the 90s, again there was this similar desire to create these tense, sort of sexual, if not sexual, psychosexual stories. And the one that came to my mind is Bouquet of a Barbed Wire, which was then remade, I think it was the early noughties, or it might have been the mid-noughties. It doesn't feel like that long ago to me, but it may have been several years now. And whereas the original does have these quite complex, dark themes, and the remake didn't ignore them, because we're in an era now that wants to explore complex and difficult dramas that deal with stories of abuse or psychologically complicated characters whose motives are devious and possibly problematic. But at the same time, there's almost like a delicacy, because whereas in the previous era they would go there and they would actually sort of explore some of those darker themes in camera, now it feels sanitized. And I remember that with I think it was Kenneth Branagh in that Bouquet of a Barbed Wire remake. And so you just get that sense of, okay, you've inferred and you've referenced and you've indicated these sort of ideas of things that are going on, but you do it in a much more sanitized, safe, I don't know, distanced way. And this is exactly, the Beguiled is exactly the same. It has exactly that same problem. Where, so this is the adaptation starring Colin Farrell, Nicole Kidman, Kirsten Dunst, Elle Fanning. It's, it's this story of a Civil War soldier who is a Union soldier in sort of deep in Confederate sympathetic territory, where he's found by a young girl who brings him to the girls' school, where there's like one headmistress, a teacher, and like 5 girls are all that's left. And they're residing there, and initially they're sort of debating whether to hand him over, to heal him, whether to sort of let him go, etc. And then at the same time, they each individually develop a fascination with him, and as I say, there is that sort of lurid sense of, each girl and woman has an attachment to him, whether it be platonic or whether it be actively sexual, sort of varies. And of course for him, there is the sort of self-preservation angle, where his super objective is to simply not get handed over to the enemy soldiers, not be left to die, and to possibly, he's also a deserter, so he doesn't even want to go back to the war, no matter whose side it is. And so you have that sense of, okay, you can see him trying to manipulate his good fortune and trying to exploit, the fact that he is this sort of a handsome, roguish character who each of the female characters is sort of developing a varied version of attachment or desire towards. And so you can already see sort of the mechanics of it. There is this sort of harem style story going on, in this sort of anime tradition. And of course you've got that sort of, as I say, the 70s version, though I will state I haven't seen the Clint Eastwood version. This is more the fact that after I saw this, I wanted to read around and sort of do a brief comparison, but I'm comparing it to a film I haven't seen, so it's more sort of theoretical. But the implication is that even in this version, as I say, there is that sort of sexploitation aspect. The idea of this vulnerable man at sort of the mercy of these different women, some of whom are innocent, some of whom you'd think would be innocent but are not, and some of whom are more sort of in the Ilsa, mistress of the SS type of character, aka the sort of the headmistress character. And you can see, like I say, there is a desire to want to try and explore that story and to sort of hint towards these themes and ideas of sort of the psychological and the sexual and the, and the nature of power and the different sort of variations of who is in control. But as I say, there is this real sanitized sense to it. I'm getting very frustrated. I massively praised Lady Macbeth all the way back in whatever video it was earlier this year, how much I liked Lady Macbeth, and I thought it really managed to create a dark, sort of foreboding setting, whilst, creating these quite complex and rich characters. But frankly, that doesn't mean I want to continue to see it all the time, and I am concerned in period dramas that we are seeing a lot of that. We're getting a lot of these very damp, cold, misery-laden period dramas about people in these sort of cut-off landscapes and how hard life is. And of course it's supposed to be that sort of representation of, life would be hard because, of the lack of resources and, the sort of the struggle to survive on a daily basis. But I understand we want to veer away from the romanticization of the past and the idea of that, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we had this sort of, when it came to period dramas, everything was beautiful and glittering, and we had the sort of Antony and Cleopatra style, almost theatricality of the past. Whereas storytelling now wants to be more naturalist, more, portray the realities of the setting. But frankly, I think it's gone to the other extreme, where it simply doesn't feel... It is an unfun setting to observe, where people are on the cusp of deep misery, and the setting is hostile, and there's this constant desire to put things either in the dark or in the mist. And although that kind of works for a film like this, because as I'm watching it, I'm getting sort of vibes of a film like of course, with Nicole Kidman in it, I was getting a real strong The Others vibe from it. Where, of course, there is something almost ghost story-like to it, and the nature of the setting, and you think, oh wow, this film could be the kind of film that would be a ghost story. But there is the cinematography really leans towards being in the dark and the shadows and that sense of demureness, and of course it's all supposed to represent repression and sort of desire, and the idea that these characters all have desires of one form or another. But as I say, it's becoming frustrating, because it is no longer an original way to portray that kind of story. It's, everything here is much more leaning towards inference and subtext, and of course that can be narratively rich and add complexity to character. But frankly, I needed more text in this. Like I say, I don't want to do a comparison to the original, which I haven't seen, but even reading around it, there were things in the text of the original that are only inferred here, and the way that it's portrayed is a lot more explicit, not graphically so, but people's intentions and desires are a lot more explicitly expressed, whereas in this version it's much more subtext and much more inferred, and it's about calculation through sort of eye performance, and as I say, I've previously, even recently, praised internalized performance, but this isn't the kind of film that I wanted that in. And so frankly, when you hit the plot beats of it, the film is very basic. And it's interesting that yesterday I was praising Wild Rose for its simplicity and how something can be simple without being basic, because this is definitely the opposite. The plot here is very simple and basic, because and I predicted almost every beat of the story before it happened, because it is a very straightforward story. And there are moments of tension and moments where characters are deciding what to do with one thing and another. But frankly, I kind of knew the direction it would go, and when decisions were made, there came a point somewhere into the second act that I went, I know exactly how this film is going to end. And so therefore, all I'm watching it for is for the character work, which again, would be fine. But if I'm going to watch this deeply repressed, subtext-laden film, it just becomes emotionally exhausting, because it is not as interesting as I think the film wants to be, or thinks that it is. And so frankly, what it boils down to is that it is just simply boring. And it's a shame, because this film has, it has Nicole Kidman, Kirsten Dunst, Elle Fanning, Colin Farrell. It has this rich cast, but it just lacks, because I don't know, it felt like it stripped away all the things that made the film interesting in the remake and left us with a film that frankly almost felt like a play. And not in the good way, not in the way that I've praised before, but in the way that it felt very flat and very performed. And I just found that so underwhelming. Anyway, and I do hope, as I say, I think Sophia Coppola is a good director, and I have seen films of hers that I have praised, and I can see her style contained within the stories. I don't know, I've struck out a couple of times, and I'm waiting to find that film that I absolutely love that she's directed. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because it's all helped me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 250 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.